What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Surf and Sales podcast, brought to you by our good friends at Win AI. If you haven't heard of Win AI, you might be living under a rock, but you will close more deals by making your funnel faster, smarter, and smoother with automated data capture, seamless CRM updates, and AI generated emails so you can streamline all your favorite sales tools into one. I am Scott Leese here with my partner in the Surf and Sales Summit and co-host of the Surf and Sales podcast, Richard Harris. How's it going, Richard?
It's going much better, Scott. As of
Yeah,
12 minutes ago, our good friend Jake Dunlap just committed to sending someone to the event in
really?
Portugal coming in October. So I
Okay,
gotta
okay.
we know Jake, so we'll have to wait for the
That's
credit
right.
card to come in. But assuming
Uh,
assuming that's true, how many people does that give us? How many slots are left? Six, five?
well, there's six. So if Jake is sending somebody from Scale, that would be down to five.
There you
We'd be
go.
down to
All right.
five.
So
Yeah.
if
Check it
you're
out.
interested,
surfandsales.com.
yeah, it's happening in October in Portugal. So maybe we'll be down to four since Mark is already in Europe, our guest, and see if we can get him to put a deposit down today.
Well, we'll see about that. Our guest today is Mark Ackers. He is the co-founder and head of sales at My Sales Coach, and he is over in Newcastle upon Tyne in the UK. How's it going, Mark?
Scott, hey Richard, going very well, thank you. Yeah, I'm in Newcastle, but for anyone who knows this part of the UK, I do not sound like a Geordie. That's because I'm from just outside of London. But yeah, I'm very well, thank you. And I did share the Surf and Sales Summit internally with Richard Smith and Kevin Beals, but my sentiment is I cannot surf for shit. And I know you'll say that's the whole point. We'll learn. It'll be fun. I couldn't even get up on my knees on a board, but it did remind me. I don't know, Scott, if you remember, I shared an idea with you, my own take on surf and sales goals. You remember that?
I do remember that actually. Yeah, I
So,
do.
Enlighten us.
Yeah,
so I had this idea that maybe one day I'll do. Maybe we should do it together. But
yeah, we should.
imagine this, right? So you just get a football game, any football game really. You rent a box at a football stadium. You deliver some sales training and coaching for 3 hours before. You have a nice meal and you watch the game. Sales goals.
Beautiful.
That's genius, dude.
Yeah.
I know. I should
Also,
do it.
Scott, you should sell
also,
that out in 24
also,
hours.
oh, this would be pretty easy actually. Also,
Yeah.
what you left out, Mark, is that we have our own little scrimmage, our own little pickup matches, on the side before and after as well. So we get a little work, a little fitness in as well.
Yeah.
Think
I love
think
it.
about think about the
I
amount of people that play football/soccer around the world compared to people who surf. The,
right.
the total addressable market here is much, much larger than the one we've been
Yeah.
going after.
Yeah.
That's
Scott
great, Yeah.
Scott would have to be careful not to injure himself though, because I
That's
know
true.
his I
That's
know
very
his
true.
body and I know his passion for soccer and
Yeah.
football is far greater than his concern for injury. And he would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
highly
I
enticed
think
to try and play. He would be frustrated. Maybe you could be the ref. Maybe we'll
I
give
could
you
ref easily. I could ref
that
easily.
you
But
could
if I
do.
if I if I went out on the pitch as a player, I think the term you're looking for is reckless abandon.
Yes,
That
because it would
that
be his
describes
last
me.
time he's ever allowed to
That's
play.
right. That's right.
Right.
So,
Well, tell everybody, Mark, tell everybody about My Sales Coach and what you all are up to so they have some context on what you're building and what you do.
Yeah. So I suppose the easiest thing to do would be talk about the problem that we solve. So look, I for the last 10 years, every day speak to a different sales leader running discovery calls, right? And whenever I speak to a sales leader, they all tell me the same thing. That they've got a problem, like a problem they need to fix with their team. That could be pipeline top of funnel, that could be the discovery calls, that could be creating urgency, negotiation, whatever that problem might be. They need to solve it if they're going to get their team to where they want to get them to. They know that coaching is the best way to level up a sales professional and that sales is a skill, but it really comes down to they've got loads of plates to spin. If you're a sales leader in the modern age, you're onboarding 1 minute, you're interviewing the next, you're having one-to-ones, urgent action items, going into meetings. So coaching can always wait till tomorrow. It's not really a metric or a KPI that you're measured on. You live on that hamster wheel of each quarter at a time. So coaching always gets kicked. And even if you do find the time to do it, you can't know everything, right? You can't be a master in all the different elements of sales. There's so much to it. So what they turn to is my sales coach. We're a marketplace of expert sales coaches. We've got 80 plus expert sales coaches. And what we do is we match the right coach to the right team at the right time to solve their problem. And we either do that as a short, intense program and we fix something and fix it fast, or it's more a subscription. We want to give our team access to great coaching on a consistent basis. And again, we match them and we provide one-to-one and group coaching as a service. That is my sales coach.
Yeah, this speaks to a large problem in sales leadership in that people get hired or take a role in arenas that they're really not meant for. Like if you're a high velocity type salesperson, like short sales cycles, more direct kind of pitching, and you take this leadership role in a enterprise arena, Fortune 500 kind of arena, that's misaligned. If you spent 30 years in enterprise sales orgs and you're taking a early stage, first founding kind of head of sales role, that's misaligned. So what are some of the most common misalignments that you see that both sales candidates and founders should try to avoid?
So, well, I think first of all, taking a step back, I think building on your point, here's just one of the greatest problems that we have in sales is that every sales manager has become a sales manager because they were a top performer, right? They did well in sales, they carried a quota, overachieved, and
if not the very top, at least in the upper third or something.
Yeah, and they get promoted for multiple reasons. Like, if they're a top performer, they're probably ambitious, they're hardworking, they want that next step. Or a business just doesn't want to lose them, so they promote them to keep them and their knowledge within the business. But just because you're a top sales professional doesn't mean you're a great manager, doesn't mean you're a good leader. And we just spoke about soccer there. It's American audience would call it football for mine. But again, the rest of the world, how many times do you see great football players become poor managers, right? It's a totally different skill set. And I think lots of people take that role as a manager because they want the title, they want the money, they want the acknowledgement, the power, all those things.
Yeah.
But it's a totally different job. And where the mistakes that I see sales leaders make is they don't embrace that change. And that, actually, they don't know how to. Very rarely do you speak to a sales manager that's had coaching and training on how to be a sales manager. They just get given the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. But it's a totally different dynamic and role and responsibility. And because they don't know how to deal with that, they manage with, do what I did. This is how I was successful. Do what I did. That doesn't really work for everybody. Everyone's got their own style, their own way of learning, way in which they like to be trained, coached, challenged, supported, and they start getting spoon-fed. Do what I did. That's what made me successful. And that doesn't really work for everybody. And it creates this awkward dynamic. So the mistakes that I see sales leaders make is that they got that role probably for the wrong reasons, in the sense of they didn't really know the role they were taking truly. Until you first step into management, you don't really know what you're taking. It's just so different. And then when it comes to putting your team first, that's a whole different mindset. Top performers are quite selfish people. They get things done their way. But actually, when you become a manager, you go to the bottom of the pile and it's all about your team. And it's a totally different mindset shift. So I think they're not prepared for that role. They don't quite know what to expect and they struggle with that. I think companies don't support them in that transition well enough. And in terms of founders, I think one of the things, second part of your answer, founder-led selling is very hard to step away from. And I think, I'm doing founder-led selling myself. I've got a team, but moving away from that and giving that trust to a sales team is very hard to do. So again, it's about hiring the right people. And then if you hire them because you believe they're good, it's not.
But how do you, so here's the problem, right? It's 2025 and we're talking about this same problem again. And I'm not talking about pre-COVID post-COVID, the last couple of years. I'm talking, look, I've been selling since the 1900s. This problem has existed since then, right?
Yeah.
It really has. What is the problem with executive leadership for this? Like, why are they still so willfully ignorant that this is a challenge? Is it just because they expect an immediate ROI and they don't want to admit that? Or is it because they never, like, why are we still talking about this problem that is so simple to solve for if you put some effort into it?
So I think there's a few reasons, right? So first of all, most senior leaders, like we talk about big companies, senior leaders, the ones that really dictate, they're from like the baby boomer, older level of Gen X, right? Whereas the majority of workforce is millennials and Gen Zers. And there is such a difference in terms of what the millennials and Gen Zers want from their employer, from their role, from their lifestyle, to what that baby boomer Gen X wants. I think there's a huge challenge there, and really understanding each other. I think the other thing, and this is, it's always a conundrum.
But hold on, I want to pause right there. Then that's still on Gen X to recognize that it's their problem. It's
you're right.
their right? So, and I'm, that's where my concern, like if you go to, interesting thing is, if you think about it, and if you talk to any early stage founder, even in the startup community, and you said, hey, imagine what kind of training and coaching you get at Coca-Cola or IBM or Microsoft or Zoom. What kind of coaching do you think their leaders get? And they'd probably sit down and figure out, they probably get some level of coaching, right? Why are they still holding back? Because I don't buy into the, well, it's just, generational difference. Like I'm done with that excuse. Just like I'm done with, every other excuse Gen X comes with, and I'm Gen X.
So I think to build on your point, I think first of all, the conundrum with this dynamic is anyone that listens to this podcast is going to be different, right? Because they're gonna care, they're gonna give a shit. People that don't care about their career, that don't listen to podcasts and try and learn that. I think the uncomfortable truth is the majority of people in the workforce, larger, and you can't have everyone that wants to progress and get to the next level. People don't care. They go to work, they earn their money, they go home, and you can't. I'm not judging those people. You need those people, right? You can't have everybody want to be climbing the ladder. But I think that's one of the challenges is most of the workforce don't give a shit, and I understand that, right? But I find that difficult because when I talk at events and training and coaching comes up, people say to me, well, why have we still got this problem? I'm like, well, it's not you. You're in the room. You care. It's everybody else outside the room. That's the problem. And they'll never be in this room. So I think that's one of the problems is a large portion of the workforce don't care enough. They can acknowledge a problem, but can they get by on their day-to-day and get their salary? Yes, they can. Sales is a beast in the sense of there's no barrier to entry. Anyone can get a sales job, right? There's no university degree. How many people dream of being a salesperson? They don't. They fall into it because they can't do anything else. So we're in an industry that has a lot of people that fall into that industry. They kind of survive. I think it's like 80% of people. I mean, you see different stats everywhere. 80% of salespeople don't want to be in sales. They're in sales, but then they get into management roles. And I think there is that challenge there. And within about 5 minutes of my discovery calls, I can tell if I'm speaking to a sales leader that gives a shit or not. And it's so refreshing. I often tell them, I often say, look, I know I'm going to enjoy this chat because I'm speaking to someone that gets it.
I'd be willing to bet you could do it in 2 minutes.
Probably. Depends on how much weather talk we have.
Yeah.
What's the dead giveaway where you feel like the particular sales leader doesn't really care?
Lack of empathy.
How is that expressed, or how do you learn that?
It's normally like body language, tone, how they describe their team, and then when you talk about out of all the things they do, right, like of all the plates they spin, where does coaching sit on their priority list? And if it's not in the top 3, it's a problem, right? I mean, it should be number 1.
What's
go
ahead.
I honestly lost my point. What was you going to say?
My bad. I was just thinking, you install these you teach people how to coach, you install these coaching programs. What is your 2025 like? Okay, here is the exact blueprint for the best possible coaching training program. Are people meeting multiple times a day, once a day, once a week? Are the topics like cyclical and they go like, let's start at top of funnel all the way down to the bottom of the funnel, then we repaint the bridge and start all over? Like, what does that program look like to you right now?
Essentially,
So
just give it all away for free, Mark.
So
That's exactly what we're supposed to do. Give everything away.
I'd love to have like a whiteboard session with you on this. I think, look, first of all, you have to acknowledge that everyone's different. You've got to meet the coachee where they're at. And I think there's a few rules of coaching, right? So number one is not necessarily in this order, but you can't want more for them than what they want for themselves. And I think you have to understand the person that you're coaching, what do they actually want? Some people will not want the things you know they're capable of achieving. They whether that's self-limiting belief, whether that's just desire, they won't want that. So I think you have to understand, who are you coaching? What do they want to achieve? You can't want more for them. It can't be about you. It's got to be about them. I think the next thing is you need to have a real unbiased understanding of what their actual needs. What there's lots of assessments out there. I use a particular assessment company to assess the traits of sellers that I hire. And I think that's helpful to make them self-aware of their blind spots and create a plan. I think the next thing comes down to what's their coaching style. So when I don't coach loads of people, I try not to at my sales coach, because I'm trying to grow and scale the business and we've got coaches, but I do still coach. And I think it's trying to understand, what do they want in terms of coaching style? Do they want accountability? Just real, you said you were going to do this, why haven't you done it? Do they want motivation and arm around the shoulder? Do they want just a safe space to vent because that makes them feel better? Do they want tactical advice that's implementable straight away? Do they want to be told the answer, but just tell them what they need to hear? Or do they want to almost go on a journey with you where you ask them the right questions so they can draw their own conclusions? And I think it's understanding what they want, mapping that to a plan of what they need, and then coaching them on a consistent basis. And I think you coach them in a few ways. One is as a group. I for the last
that's the one to many style coaching.
Yeah. So every week for about 7 years, I would say almost without fail. Obviously, there'll be exceptions. I've done a group call coaching session, and that's where everyone nominates a call. We vote on the call that we want to have coached, and we coach that call. And I think call coaching is just paramount. Like, so much of it comes down to the quality of discovery. But then it's about that one-to-one coaching. And actually, I'm a big fan of that random acts of coaching. So I can think in the last couple of weeks, SDR, I'm sort of pointing to where they sit, got off a call, could tell it didn't go very well, had spare 15 minutes. I was like, should we go and have 5 minutes? Should we just play back that call? So it was like a random act of coaching. But what I'm really passionate about is external coaching as well. So I appreciate that is going to be the case with my sales coach, but everyone on my team has an external coach. Everyone in the business has an external coach. I've got two, right? And it's just having regular access to someone that's not your boss, that's not connected to the company or the company goals, someone that's going to show up for you, someone that's going to be there through the hard times and the good times, that is going to understand where you are today, where you want to get to. And there's someone that you can just speak to openly and honestly that isn't going to judge you, right? And they've walked in your shoes, they've been where you want to be, they've achieved what you want to achieve, and they're there to help you. And I think having that regular access to external coaching is a luxury 99.9% of salespeople don't have. I actually just got lucky and got coached. I've been in sales for about 15 years. I thought I was all right for the first 8. I did. I thought I was all right. Turns out I was shit. I was really shit.
For 8 years. Mark
Yeah.
thought he was good. It turns out he wasn't.
I remember my first coaching session, so
what was the wake up moment of like, oh my God, I'm actually not good?
My first coaching session. So my CEO, I work for a company called Refract, got acquired, but just think of Gong, Chorus, Jiminy, that sort of thing, right? So I work for a company called Refract. And I was at an event with my colleague, Stu, and we were demoing the system at an event. And I was showing one of my calls off, and out of nowhere, all of a sudden, it had all these comments. It had been coached by my CEO. And I remember reading these comments, and they were so brutal. And it was just, but it was like one word, like, crap, not good, shit, poor question, whatever, 1-2 words. And I remember talking to Stu, I was like, I'm going to get sacked here. Like, shit, the CEO who's listening to this call thinks it's all. Anyway, next thing I know, I get a calendar invite. Can you meet 8 o'clock, Costa Coffee?
That's also dodgy.
Yeah, it was before work, Friday morning, 8 o'clock before Costa Coffee. I'm like, shit, I'm going to get sacked. Anyway, I go and try and speak to Kev, and he's like, he's like, oh, it's fine, we should have a chat. Let's have a chat on Friday. So I walk into Costa, and he sat there, and he says, do you want a coffee? And I'm like shaking. I'm like, I don't know, do I? I don't know how long I'm going to be here for. And he goes, I've coached one of your calls. And I was like, I know. And he's like, how do you know? I was like, I've seen all the comments. And his face dropped. And he was like, you're not meant to have seen that. And I went, well, I bloody have. And he was like, no, they're my notes. And I was like, right. Well, I've read them all. And he was like, right, you're not meant to have seen that. He said, I listened to one of your calls. I thought I'd coach it. And then I remember the phrase, right? He went, look, I'll be honest, you're a big boy. I've coached you like you're a big boy, right? And we went for an hour through this call, and the feedback was delivered in the best way. Like, he's such a good guy. But at the end of the day, it's my body of work. It's my career that's being critiqued. I've never experienced this before. And there was a couple of times where, do you know when you do that thing where you look up and someone's cutting onions and your eyes sort of water? And it was really tough. And then at the end of the session, he was like, well, this was great. I think we should do this again. And I remember thinking, I fucking hope not. This has been
never want to be here. Yeah.
But then we met every Friday for like 3 years at 8 o'clock. And I remember about 6 months in, he said to me, look, it was a really good session. And he said, I just want you to know, I've not changed, by the way. I still coach you like you're a big boy, but you just got much better.
You're just improving. Yeah.
And I had, I was closing more deals. I soon become one of, if not the top performer, right in that echelon. I got the opportunity to start managing people. And there was this moment where it just switched. And I was like, if it didn't happen on the Friday, I was gutted. I was like, that I'm missing out. Right, like I'm losing out because you can't coach me, and then like team coaching sessions, what I spoke about earlier. I always wanted to be Michael, even though it was a whole team. I'd make a joke of it, like, oh my God, Michael again, me getting picked on again. Secretly, I loved it because I was like, I'm learning more than everybody here because it's my call. But that was the moment, my first coaching session. I was just like, shit, this call's really bad. Like, closed questions. I wasn't listening properly. I didn't pick up on buying signals. I had a need for approval. I gave weak answers. I think that was one key moment. If you want a second one,
and that's after that's after 8 years. Think about that. If you're listening to this and
how'd you survive 8 years?
You've been in sales for less than 8 years.
So, you
can learn still.
Two things. This is what makes me laugh. I speak to some sales leaders and they go, oh, my team's really experienced. They've been in sales for 10 years or whatever. And I'll be like, have they just had the same year 10 times? Because that's what I had, same year, sort of 8 times. In terms of how I survived, Richard, honestly, I think I got a little bit lucky. I remember there was one round of redundancies and I must have been close. But I think, in all honesty, here's what I did really well. And I know it's not trendy to say this in 2025. I fucking worked hard every day. Do you know what I mean? I was a hard worker. I was in early. I left late. I took the role seriously. And I just never got coached. But no one equally was coaching me. My sales manager never sat with me to try and help me. I just worked hard. And I think what I was a strength of mine was showing that I worked hard, being really, what's the right word here? Organized, right? Like I was really organized. And I do think I was a very good, it wasn't called an SDR, but I was a very good SDR, which I think gave me a lot of grace being an AE. But equally, I was an SDR for like 3 years. You know, I think most SDRs after 6 months want to be an AE. I was one for 3 years.
Well, hold on. They actually just want to be a go-to-market sales consultant now.
Well,
right.
After 6 months,
right.
Not an AE. Yeah.
So I gotta shift gears on you a little bit. Talking to a new sales manager, right? Someone who, and they have some level of desire to coach. Perhaps they have coached some of the people on their team, and now they're sort of getting the official title, right? So let's go with someone who's kind of wired, right? What's the one thing a brand new sales coach needs to understand before they start coaching? What do they, and I don't mean like, well, now your revenues relied upon the whole team instead of yourself. Like, I don't mean that. What's like one good piece of like, hey, when you coach your reps, here's something to think about as you learn to be a better coach and leader yourself?
So if I'm speaking to a sales manager who's going to start coaching, what's one thing they need to hear? Is what you're saying?
Right. To help them be a better coach, right? To help them be good at coaching.
I'm torn between two. I might just give you two.
Go ahead. Give us two.
I think the first one I've already said, you can't want more for someone than what they want for themselves. I've seen that. I've sat with people and I thought, wow, you could be amazing. And they're a lazy little shit. And I just think, if they don't want it, can't want more for them than what they want for themselves. And I think the other thing is, and this is the hardest thing, is you have to disconnect from the outcome. And I think that's where sales managers really struggle. They coach on their own agenda. They've got a number to hit.
What's that mean though? Right? Like, yeah. So dive into what you just said a little more.
So every sales manager, when they're coaching, they've got a boss. They've got someone they report into. They've got a goal that they hit. They need their team to hit that goal. So, let's pick something that's a little bit left field, but totally reasonable request. Someone might want help to be coached on social selling, right? Totally reasonable. We all know social selling is a really big channel. But as a sales manager, that's a topic you might look at and go, is that going to help you hit your number this quarter? Can we focus on prospecting, cold calling? Can we focus on your discovery calls, rather than LinkedIn and social selling? And I think that's because you're attached as a coach to the company goal. You're not attached to that individual and what they want to achieve. So I think, look, there's loads of things there, but those are the things that well, and I think the third one is you can't have the same expectations for what you did. Just because it was what you did and what made you successful, you can't create a team of mini yous. And I think I've seen managers make that mistake. They have hire people just like themselves. They try and coach people to be just like themselves.
I was that person. I want to sort of summarize what you said, which at a higher level, I interpreted what you said, and call me out if I'm wrong, is that yes, you need to focus on some tactical day-to-day blocking and tackling, improving the sales performance. However, you need to teach them some long-term sales strategies too. That social selling, sure, it's not something you're going to talk about every week, but certainly once a month or twice a quarter, you should be coaching your team to do that. Unless, and maybe Scott will have a different opinion, unless you're really trying to turn that into a channel, right? Then it might become a more regular thing. But I interpret what you said as, hey, you got to figure out as a sales leader, you coach the day-to-day tactical for the pipeline and the conversions and the revenue, but then you also coach to these long tail pieces of driving business. Is that a fair summary?
I think, that's a fair summary, but it's made me think of the other big problem, actually, that is, everyone's going to relate to this, is it's so hard to let them crash the car. Like when you sit and live coach on a call and you see that car's going to crash, you grab the wheel. You grab the wheel.
It's instinct. It's instinct. It's like grabbing the bicycle before your kid falls off when you're teaching them to learn how to ride a bike. Yeah.
What an appropriate analogy, right? I've just taught my son to ride his bike last summer, actually. And one of the first things I said to him, I said, listen, you're going to get hurt. You're going to fall off. You are going to hurt yourself. I need you to know that. And he's like, yeah, it's fine. As soon as he fell off, I could see his face where he wanted to cry, but it's like it kicked in that he remembered this was going to happen. Right. And he was like, I'm okay. But he quickly wanted to stop after about 10 minutes. But you're right. And I think that's one of the challenges. I still struggle with that today, maybe more so as a co-founder, but I pre-warn the reps. Like when they invite me to their calls, I say, look, one of my weaknesses is I know I'm going to take over and I don't want to do that. But I think I struggle, and I try not to join calls, particularly when I feel like, look, if this goes wrong, it's okay, right? But live coaching and accepting a crash is so hard, but it's actually really important. But I think what you can do there, and what I try to do, is look for those random acts of coaching. So like here's an example, right? Someone said to me, got a call, the CFO is going to join. I'm like, should we plan for that? And they're like, okay. And it's a random act of coaching. I'm like, so if they say this, what would you say? And we almost like just role play, but that like specific moment. And I'm like, okay. And if they say this, what would you say? Okay, let's just roll. And it's kind of like trying to set them up so they kind of go and drive the car by themselves. But I do so with confidence. They've had a lesson beforehand.
Yeah. We got time for one more question from us, and then we'll pivot to you and see if you have any questions for us or if we can be helpful to you. But one more shout out for our sponsors over at Win AI, where you can get frictionless playbook adoption, seamless rep onboarding, and effortless CRM hygiene. Check out win.ai. All right. My question is, how are coaches supposed to prepare and position themselves and maintain their value with the ever-looming threat and presence of AI, which seemingly every product on the market wants to replace the human doing the coaching with an avatar, with AI, with automation, so people can get coached whenever they want, wherever they want, for however long they want, and done cheaper and theoretically at a larger scale. So what is a sales coach supposed to do?
So, I mean, I think AI is fascinating. I use it every hour of the day. I couldn't be more a fan of it. I think it's the CEO of Microsoft, I think, said that they think that coaching is the single greatest beneficiary of AI.
At present.
Yeah, well, at present, right? Single use.
Yeah, I think he said at present. Yeah,
right. And you think you've got to listen to that. I think I can totally see where that will help. Coaching obviously takes lots of different formats. We focus specifically on sales coaching, specifically. What people really want the most help with is tactical advice. And actually, they're okay wherever that comes from, as long as they believe it. And I think that's the challenge, right? You can use ChatGPT. I use it every hour of the day to get tactical advice, but is it totally applicable and right and in the right style and tone? Not convinced at this moment in time. No doubt, it'd be fucking better this time tomorrow, right? But I think in terms of sales coaching, part of it is that accountability piece. AI will not hold you accountable like a sales coach will hold you accountable. When you've got to show up and speak to a sales coach and talk about what you said you were going to do last time and if you've done it or not, that anyone can turn ChatGPT or AI off. And I think that's one of the biggest things with coaching, right? How many times, anyone listening to this, right? Just think about how many times have you read something in a book, watched something on YouTube, heard something at a conference and thought, that's a great idea, and then done bugger all the time because we're not accountable to it. And that is one of the key drivers of a coach. They are going to get to work with you on a human-to-human level. They will understand where you are and where you want to get to, and they will hold you accountable to those goals. So I think that's a key thing. I think the other thing is coaching. I think AI will always, going forward, be intertwined with coaching. And like you say, it's in between the sessions, getting their help where you couldn't necessarily get it live from a coach. But a coach will always have over AI that human to human level. And like I said earlier on, sometimes
yeah. I like that. I like that. And
yeah.
I like that analogy. Actually, it's like I'm old enough to remember, and you guys are too. Maybe like, do you remember those fitness videos, Richard?
Yes.
Like jazzercise fitness videos
Yes.
or whatever. And it's like at the time, it was like, oh, no one's ever going to go to the gym anymore because you
Right.
can just watch these fitness videos and
In their
exercise
home.
at home. But to Mark's point, there's no accountability there.
Yeah.
You don't have an accountability partner,
I
accountability
think
buddy.
I think too right now with the AI piece of things, like even if I can have a AI coach, my rep on every single call and give feedback, even at the manager level, I can't get rid of my manager because I got to make sure I need my manager and leader to make sure that the AI is actually coaching the right thing because it's still not perfect, right? And it can also come down to, well, what methodology you're using, neat selling or medic or medpic or whatever it is, right? Someone's still got to watch the AI just to make sure. And then, so to hold the AI accountable. And then I agree with you, Mark, too, of like, okay, well, what's the plan with this? And like, if you have A players, they're the ones who probably don't need as much of the accountability support. B players need a little bit more accountability support because they hopefully want to become A players. And those C players, I don't even know if I'd let them use AI at this point because I don't believe them to be accountable to themselves yet. And there's the flexibility in that C player might be, well, if they're ramping, right? Or I'm bringing them in because they were an A player somewhere, but that's kind of how I see it. I think the leadership piece doesn't go away just yet, and I think that's what a lot of executives are thinking, that you can get rid of that middle manager sooner than later, and in fact you can't.
I think to sort of just build upon and conclude, I think here's the other thing. I think so much of having that human relationship, what appeals to me is hearing from someone that's walked in my shoes. They've been where I want to be. They've achieved what I want to achieve, and it's their delivery and it's their storytelling. And I think that's what's really compelling. And
Yeah.
I look forward to meeting with my coach. I don't need to see my coach every day. I can use AI and get the resources that I need. But you know what? Like when I get to speak to so one of my coaches I meet every month, the other I meet twice a month. It's just like, just yesterday, it was just a download of thoughts. And just sometimes it was validating what I was thinking. And
Yeah.
sometimes it was just asking me a question that I probably wasn't quite asking myself. And sometimes that's what you need as well. So I think overall it's that accountability piece, it's that human relationship.
Yeah.
And
I like
it
that.
is just working with someone that, I heard this a long time ago on a podcast, and I think it's the best advice I ever got. And I wish I could track down that episode, but it was just surround yourself with people that have got what you want and have been where you want to be. That's the room you need to be in. And I wasn't in that room at that time.
Cool. Well, let's pivot. We got time for you to ask us a question, and then we got to get out of here. What would you like to ask us, if anything? You may be like, you guys don't know jack about sales coaching, and that could be true too.
So I tell you one of the stats. Let me get the exact stat for you, right? Because I think I think I know my take on the answer, but I want to get your take on the answer. So
He wants to see how wrong we are on this statistic.
Right.
We did a survey at my sales coach of over 1,600 sales professionals took part in this survey. We believe it to be the largest ever sales coaching specific survey ever conducted. And here's one of the key findings. 38% of reps said they rarely or never receive coaching. 38%. But 90% of the leaders claim they coach at least monthly. Where do you think that disconnect is?
The definition of coaching. The sales leader walks by somebody in passing and says, hey, make a few more calls today. They're counting that as coaching. You're in the break room and they're like, hey, Mark, make sure you ask this one question today, incorporate that into your pitch. That counts as coaching. But the sales rep is looking for what you were talking about getting from that founder who sat with you for an hour, reviewed calls, worked on tonality, cadence, you know, specific pitch information, objection handling, real detailed stuff, right? I mean, I once sat with a rep and for 45 minutes straight, I made them work on the first 2 sentences of their pitch over and over and over because they simply could not get it right. They couldn't get it, kept stumbling around. They'd be too fast, too slow. They'd have no energy, no intonation. And the rep was like, never have I ever had somebody spend this much amount of time with me on this first like couple sentences. I'm like, well, it's arguably the first sentences that matter the most. So we might as well get it right. So I would say that the delta is in what people consider to be coaching. What do you think, Richard?
So I've done this state of mental health and sales report, right, over the last couple of years. And the data aligns very much so with what you're saying, Mark, that of the top 13 things that made people successful, it was when they felt supported by their leadership and manager, right? And coaching is a big piece of that. I think the reason that disconnect exists is accountability. Same thing you said earlier. The managers don't want to be accountable. They want to be able to pass the blame as far down the line as they can so they don't get sacked, right? They want to make sure that, of course they're going to tell their leadership, I'm doing one-on-ones every week. And one-on-ones are really just fucking pipeline reviews, which you and I both know is not a one-on-one, right? Or the only time they sort of do a drive-by is to ask about a deal and maybe well, why don't you ask them this? Or why don't you say that? And it's coming from a tone of criticism, parental. So that's why the disconnect is still there. I think and in an even bigger world, right, particularly in the startup world where a lot of us swim, the idea of slowing down to speed up does not exist. They think it's all about speed, right? They want to do it better, faster, and cheaper, right? That's what everybody wants. But you can only do 2 of the 3 in most cases. And everybody wants faster and cheaper, even though better actually does make it faster and cheaper in the long run. I think that's where those are the places where the disconnect exists between why aren't managers coaching as much as they say they are compared to what the reps are saying they're getting coached on.
Good answer, chaps. Enjoyed that.
Yeah. All right. So got to bring this to an end. Just want to say thank you to our listeners. By the way, if you happen to be watching on YouTube, please leave us a comment, leave Mark a comment, hit the subscribe button. We're pushing on our YouTube. Leave us a review on iTunes, wherever you like to listen to this. Mark, where can people get a hold of you? Mark from My Sales Coach. But Mark, where can I get a hold of you easily?
Best place to be LinkedIn. So Mark with a K, Ackers, Ackers. I would say close to most days I write and share content that salespeople would find of interest. But that'd be the best place to find me. Happy to connect and chat with anyone on there.
Love it. Cool. Thanks so much for spending some time with us, man. I don't know if you're a supporter or not, but if you are, good luck to Newcastle next week when they take on Liverpool in the cup final. I'm hoping for a much better outcome than yesterday's Champions League match.
Scott, what day and time is the cup final for those listening? Because if we have to reschedule a podcast recording, I'm sure we're going to need to.
Oh boy,
sure. I need to support you.
It's Tuesday or Wednesday of next week, I think.
No, it's Sunday. So Sunday. First of all, I do want to have on record I'm not a Newcastle fan. I want that on record. It's on record. But so
Sunday, this Sunday.
It's this Sunday, 4:00 UK time. So, East Coast 11 a.m.
Well, this podcast might come out after that match is concluded.
Yeah. Sure. And Scott, that means that if we have anything scheduled on Monday and you lose, that I should just expect to not hear from you.
That's probably right. Right. Yeah. So, because it will have been a really bad week if that's the case. It will have been tough. All right.
All right. Interesting one.
Mark, thanks so much, Mark. This is a lot of fun. Good to connect with you again.
Cheers, Scott. Thanks, Richard. Thanks very much.
Yep. Thanks, guys.